So before seeing Trey Edward Shults' new film Hurry Up Tomorrow starring The Weeknd, I was seeing a big range in the reviews and reactions that were coming out online. I saw those panning the film as one of the worst they'd ever seen, and then Weeknd fans and those in the know of the film story saying it was a great conclusion to the music icon's persona. Now, just to set the context up for my review, I'm kind of in a weird situation with this film because I'm both a massive Weeknd fan and have been for well over a decade, but also someone who reviews and talks about films on a daily basis. So I'm essentially coming into this film with a foot in both camps. And after seeing it, I think I'm mostly okay with what Hurry Up Tomorrow had to offer. Sure, I think there are some strange choices here, but also some really bold ones too. So in this video, I'm going to be giving you my review of Hurry Up Tomorrow, discussing whether I think the film is misunderstood. There will be brief spoilers in my analysis, so if you haven't seen the film yet, then I would recommend watching it before checking out this video. Before I get into it though, if you want to see more on upcoming films like the Hurry Up Tomorrow movie, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating and subscribing to the channel. But without further ado, let's dive into my review for Hurry Up Tomorrow. So Abel Tesfaye, famously known as The Weeknd, stands out as one of the most prominent figures in today's music industry. His latest album Hurry Up Tomorrow not only serves as a potential farewell to his persona as The Weeknd, but also marks his significant debut in the film industry. Directed by Trey Edward Shults, known for his previous works like Waves and It Comes at Night, this project is a raw exploration filled with striking visuals and deep psychological insights, offering an unfiltered perspective on its central themes and character. Now, while I've broke down the film fully in my previous video, I think it's important to revisit some of the key narrative elements of the plot, as it does provide crucial context for understanding the film's unique approach. And in the topic of this video being about whether Hurry Up Tomorrow is misunderstood, it makes it important to understand the film on a certain level. So in the opening of the semi-autobiographical project, Abel Tesfaye, who portrays himself, appears to be living the dream of the star. As The Weeknd, he is about to embark on a new tour with loads of enthusiastic fans eager to experience his performances after their deep connection with his music. However, beneath the star persona lies a very different story. The real Abel is grappling with the pain of a recent breakup, and his best friend and manager Lee, portrayed by Keoghan, adds to all the pressure, urging him to keep pushing through the tour and removing himself from the more personal aspects of his life. This overwhelming tension reaches a breaking point when The Weeknd unexpectedly loses his voice during a live concert. In the midst of his emotional voice collapse on stage, he locks eyes with a young woman named Anima, played by Jenna Ortega, who later finds him backstage trying to leave the concert after the incident. They escape the arena together and eventually go back to a hotel room and spend the night there, with Abel feeling much more comfortable than he has in a while. But while we think that Abel might be turning a corner, just like in the story of all his previous albums, he finds himself turning back to the persona of The Weeknd. The next morning, Abel wants to resume his tour without Anima and intends on leaving the hotel room. There is a moment of questionable acting here, but it's one where Abel Tesfaye is clearly showing that the pop star aspect of his Weeknd character is hard to move aside. However, as we learn, Abel isn't allowed to leave the hotel because after being knocked out by Anima and confronting his demons in a trippy dream sequence, Anima ties him to the hotel room bed and attempts to get him to open up about his sins and confess to her. Essentially, shed the skin of the Weeknd persona that has been a constant cycle and battle for him all these years throughout his music. To portray all of this, Anima dances to The Weeknd's tracks, particularly Blinding Lights and Gasoline, while he remains bound. She points out during this scene that despite the insane popularity and catchy tones of his songs, the lyrics reveal a deeper suffering within him. Her character exudes a sense of urgency, as if she is battling for Abel's very soul. In contrast to this, his manager Lee embodies the darker aspects of Abel's persona, representing the shadowy pop star tendencies of The Weeknd. When Lee finally bursts into the hotel room, a brief struggle ensues, but Anima swiftly ends the confrontation by killing him with a shard of glass. So it's like both aspects of Abel's persona are squaring off in front of him, and he has to endure it. Abel must confront his sins, and although this confrontation can be difficult for him to endure, it highlights that this is important for personal growth. And the reason Anima feels a connection to this and does what she does in the film is because she is an actual part of his psyche. Essentially, the character Anima, along with Abel's manager Lee, serve as symbolic representations of Abel's inner turmoil. Drawing from Carl Jung's concept, Anima is the unconscious feminine aspect within a man, and she as a character in the film embodies the struggle to connect Abel's conscious self with his deeper, often hidden emotions. Throughout the narrative, she encourages him to confront his suppressed feelings of self-destruction and urges him to acknowledge these truths and move on from it. So rather than being a real person in the film, Anima is essentially the Abel part of his persona before the Weeknd took a hold of him. And on the flip side to this, Barry Keoghan's Lee embodies all the Weeknd part of Abel's identity, the id or ego, focusing solely on the darker pop star tendencies of his life. When we eventually get to the end of the film, Anima tries to force out Abel's true self, so she drenches him and the hotel bed in gasoline and is poised to ignite him in flames. As Abel begins to sing the final track from his new album, he reveals his deep remorse and acceptance of his past actions. The heartfelt confession prompts Anima to release him, as Abel openly acknowledges his guilt and seeks forgiveness for his previous wrongdoings. He has finally embraced his true self, shedding the persona of the Weeknd as he opens up to her, representing the Abel side of his identity shining through. This transformation is visually depicted through Anima as Abel, symbolically incinerating the Weeknd's character on the bed. After leaving the hotel room as Abel, the film ends where it started, in front of the mirror with Abel looking back at himself. This time, he's not looking at himself as the Weeknd, as he is looking directly at a rediscovered Abel. He has found his true self once again, and hopefully, he can now move forward having been cleansed of his sins. Now, the reason I laid all of this out is because a lot of people who see this film and aren't in the know of Abel's story will not get a lot of the hidden storytelling within. This is just the basic plot, and there's things in there that the general audience just won't take away from it. I've seen a lot of reactions already that haven't even realised that Anima and Lee are a part of his psyche and represent the two contrasting elements of the Weeknd persona throughout the years in his music. And I think this is exactly why the film is being received the way it is. I think on one side, it can be argued that it's the film's fault for targeting more of the general audience, as to truly get and feel it, I think you have to be a fan of Abel's music. And by saying this, I'm not saying that people won't understand it, I just think that they won't feel what happened on the same level that fans of his work will feel. On top of this, not everyone is going to walk out of Hurry Up Tomorrow knowing that the sequence where Abel is having childlike fun at a theme park with Anima is heightened in thematic resonance by the use of the song Drive from his latest album. Also, not everyone is going to walk out of the film understanding that the song Wake Me Up is played at the start of the film in two very different contexts, one being to represent the Weeknd as a star, portraying his superpowers through his artistry, and the other showing that the cracks have got bigger and the Abel side of him is finding things difficult. There's many examples of this that connect back to Abel's music, and while I absolutely love them and see how smartly they've been integrated into the film, many who aren't in the know just won't get that. Now, as I highlighted at the start of this video, this film put me in quite a weird situation, because as both a Weeknd fan and a film fan, I can see why both of the popular perspectives towards it have been formulated. And with that in mind, it makes me question whether this film may have been better off as a release on Abel's social channels or something else that primarily targets his audience. Now, I will say that there are big critiques of the film to be made, like say the overly elongated nature of some scenes and some moments needing to be trimmed down a touch. But on the artistic flip side to that, I can see why those decisions were made and why they decided to release the film the way it was. For one, the cinematography, editing and camera movement are all there to reflect the two sides of the Weeknd psyche. For instance, the aspect ratio constantly switches in the film to relate to both aspects of Abel's life. The larger-than-life euphoria of being on stage as The Weeknd is depicted via a wide-open ratio, whereas the more claustrophobic moments as Abel in the hotel room are represented by a boxed-in 4.3 ratio. Also, at the start of the film, we get the intoxicating sequences with The Weeknd and Lee, and to depict this, Shults edits the film using really tight trims, unbearable camera movement, and flashes of club lights to make you feel that unbalance. In comparison, when we spend moments in the hotel room with Anima and the Abel side of his persona later on, there's more longer takes in the editing and scenes with very little camera motion. Everything is allowed to play out in a vulnerable way, and that is in conjunction with the sincere part of Abel underneath. So while I can sit here and critique artistic choices and things in the film that maybe the average viewer won't like, it's very clear that these choices have been made for a reason. The job of a film, which is an art form, is not to make choices based on the audience, but to use the art form in a distinctive way to tell the narrative they want to tell using visual and sonic tools. If you are truly a fan of The Weeknd, understand and feel his music, then I think you see this as a positive rather than a negative. It's such a weird one because I can totally understand the other perspective, especially since this was a film released to a wider audience. But then me, being a massive Abel fan and understanding what was being shown in the film, has to think that what was shown is quite misunderstood. So overall, this film is quite the unusual one, because if you are a fan of The Weeknd, understand his story, or have listened to his new album, then like me, I think this film hits you a lot harder, and you understand and respect it a whole lot more. If you don't know anything about him and his story, then you're likely to have the complete opposite reaction. With Abel's deep connection to cinema and music videos that reflect this, I can understand why this was released the way it was, and it was a bold move for them to make a film like this. Whether it gets more love over time is totally up to the audience, and personally, I really enjoyed it and appreciated what it went for. But again, that might just be because it connects to me a whole lot more in knowing his story. What I will say though is that out of all of the films I've seen in the last 12 months, I think this one is up there as a project that could have a change in reaction over time. Maybe I'll end up being wrong about this, but I just think there's a lot more here than meets the eye, especially when thinking about its filmmaking and psychological narrative work. Specifically, I think the music is its own character in the film, being used as a tool to elevate the thematics and narrative beats. If the wider audience did understand some of these choices, then I think they'd appreciate the approach of the film a whole lot more. So is Hurry Up Tomorrow misunderstood? Well, yes and no. If you are a Weeknd fan like me, you'll probably think that it is, and appreciate the deeper approach that they went for, both narratively and stylistically. If you're not a Weeknd fan and didn't get much about it, then you'll probably think the statement of it being misunderstood is completely out of order. But that was my review for Hurry Up Tomorrow. As a whole, I enjoyed this film more than most will, and I think the way they took this on as a unique psychological thriller was quite commendable. Again, it does have its fair amount of issues in pacing, a few scenes that went on a bit too long, and some of the acting wasn't brilliant, but I was able to connect with the heart at the centre of it and appreciate the artistic choices made to elevate this. This was admittedly helped by being a big Weeknd fan and in the know of what was being tackled surrounding Abel Tesfaye's story. And again, on the flip side to this could be considered as a primary weakness of the distribution of the film. But to those who have seen the film, what did you think of Trey Edward Shults' telling of The Weeknd's final chapter, and do you agree with some of the points I have raised in my review? It's all subjective, and I appreciate a range of reactions and reviews, so let me know down below in the comment section what you thought about the film, alongside things that stood out with your first impressions. For more videos on upcoming film releases like Hurry Up Tomorrow, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.